Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to this evening's session looking at the book Unique. Night after night, we've listened to the topics and asked our searching questions. Whilst Dr. Pandit has given us a deeper insight to our questions, he's also encouraged us to be neutral inquirers, to research the question and do our own reading and weighing up the evidence to see both sides. As we listen tonight, submit your questions via YouTube, Facebook, or Zoom. These can be posted via the link, which will be posted in the chat. I will now hand you over to Dr. Pandit. Over to you, Dr. Pandit.
A sound check again. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Dr. Pandit.
Very well. Okay, so now we are together and let's get to the screens that we will get to. This is the one, and this one, and this. I show. Here we are, April 6th. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you again, and we meet again for another session. Yesterday, we looked at the descriptions of the man, Jesus. Where did we get the descriptions of him? From the book. So if he is unique, like we saw yesterday in those 7 points that we looked at, then we should also ask, is the book unique? Is that writing also unique? We saw that it was credible, but now the question is, will it grip you also? So in other words, we want to know both. We want to know whether the man and the book make a combo that is reasonable and reasonably attractive, not just reasonable, but reasonably attractive enough to kind of impress us, to tell us that you've got to look at this a little more carefully. So that's the background for today's topic. Is the book really totally unique? So the question really is, if you say the man is unique, is the book also unique? We're going to look at seven, like yesterday's seven, another seven features, which might tell us that it really points in that direction. So, number one, it is amazingly written. Here's what I mean by amazingly written. It's written in different generations, has different diverse authors. It was written in different places and circumstances, different times and moods. It has very different literary styles in the book, and it is written on different continents and in different languages. So we're going to look at each of those right now for this first point. The first point is it is amazingly written. So the first of those points is different generations. The first author, most likely Moses. He wrote the first 5 books and also the book of Job. And he wrote this about 1400 to 1300 BC. The last author was John, the Revelator, they call him, about 90 to 100 AD period of writing of the whole book from Genesis to Revelation, approximately 1400 years. So it's written in different generations, in different ages. Number two, it is written by very different authors. 40 of them by name we know, differing backgrounds. Here's some of them. Moses, he was educated in the top universities of his day in Egypt, and he became a judge and a leader. Joshua was a military general who took over from Moses. David, we are looking at different authors, but here in this case, the same author at different times in his life. David wrote as a shepherd, as a poet, as a musician, and also as a king. Daniel, prime minister of two great world empires, one after another, shifting over from to getting onto Medo Persia as well, uh, from Babylon to Medo Persia. That's where Daniel was. And in both of them, he was A prime minister. Can you imagine being a prime minister of two great world empires? Amos was a herdsman. Now look at the difference. From a prime minister herdsman, Luke was a physician and a par excellent historian. Matthew was a tax collector, disliked by his own community. Peter was a fisherman. Paul was a Jewish rabbi, petite and erudite. Mark was just a personal attendant. Now, can you see the spectrum? Somebody had asked earlier, was there anything special about them? You can see this list and you say that actually there was in themselves nothing special. What's so special about being a herdsman? What's so special about being a fisherman or a personal attendant? So they were themselves not special. They were given a special task, and that is because God touched them and said, can you be a writer for me? Can you be a speaker for me? So, in themselves, nothing special. They were just like one of us. So, what does that tell us? If we believe this God, he can come and touch you too. He won't make you a writer of a Bible, but he can give you information in a very special way that will open your own mind. Different circumstances. These same people, look at how they were, at what circumstances they wrote their stuff out. Moses, while he was traveling as the head of a nomadic troop, nomadic tribe, they were slaves. Trying to get them together itself would have been a big task. But he wrote even while he was doing that. Jeremiah, when he was punished in a dungeon, in fact, they say some of the writings that we have of Jeremiah was actually spoken in that dungeon, and one of his scribes wrote it out. Daniel, while he was peaceful at home and also in the palace. Paul, traveling, sometimes free, sometimes imprisoned in a jail. David, he first wrote as a shepherd and then as a fugitive outlaw running here and there, and then as a king. Luke on extensive travels, John in lonely exile on a deserted island. Can you see the different circumstances and different times and moods? Moses as an undisputed leader, but also as an exasperated leader because the people are not really listening to him at all the time. All the time. David, like we said, outlaw plus as a king. Solomon in his younger days, I mean, giddy with abundance and prosperity. But then toward the end of his life, when he reflected on his life, it seemed like life was actually just brought down to ashes in dejection. Daniel, he wrote in confidence very peacefully, but some of his writings he himself didn't understand. He was so perplexed that he was sick, physically sick. He knew what he was going to write was something that seemed very dramatic, and not only dramatic, very important, major, and yet he couldn't understand what he was writing. He was perplexed. Jeremiah, grief, bitterness. Isaiah and Saul led conviction and hope. In fact, Isaiah is called the gospel prophet, the one who gave the good news. The word gospel means good news. We're going to look at it tomorrow, by the way, that word. Luke, exactness, detail, excellent historian. Paul, he would write tough letters as well as very tenderly. So these are the times and moods that are differently expressed in the same book. Different literary styles. Now just look at that. One book, we agreed 66 different books, but look at the different styles in which they wrote. Storytelling, for example, in Genesis and Esther. Historical, Chronicles and Kings. This year that happened. At the fifth year of this person's reign, this happened. Historical. Poetry and song, psalms, romance, Song of Solomon and Ruth, didactic or teaching, Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, personal letters, Paul's epistles, biography, Luke and Acts, autobiography, Ezekiel, code of law, Torah, the five books of Moses, the Pentateuch, prophetic, like Isaiah and Daniel, parables that we see in the Gospels, and symbolism, like we see in the book of Revelation. Amazing spectrum of different literary styles in the same book, different continents, Asia, Africa, Europe. Do you know the Bible, different parts were written in different continents, different languages. In just a moment. Um, the Old Testament, mainly in Hebrew and some Aramaic. Some of Daniel's statements were in Aramaic. The New Testament, mainly Greek and some Aramaic. Some of Jesus' last words on the cross were in Aramaic. So, three languages: Hebrew, Greek, and Aramaic. So, I've looked at quite a few things regarding the writing of the Bible. And what do we find here? Different ages, different authors, diverse authors, different places and circumstances, different times and moods, different literary styles, different continents on which it was written, different languages. Can you see one word at least that's going common through all those 7 points there? It's the word different. And yet, this brings us to the next point: amazing harmony. Obviously, then somewhere along the line there it was harmonized. Single source of information, single story and theme through all the 66 books, and a single hero and lead character. Would a random selection of 10 authors, just 10, not 40, living at different times over, say, 2 to 400 years, write on the same subject and have the same theme? I've written out a list of 10. Let's see what you think. Let's choose 10 individuals and we'll ask these 10 to just write whatever really is from deep within. Just write it out. And let's ask a question after describing this list of 10. Here are the 10. We will choose a servant, a president, a teacher, a shepherd, a businessman, an astronaut, a farmer, a military general, a university professor, and a priest. 10. Some of them live here where I am here in the United States. Some of them live in Mexico. Some of them live in England. So we're going to ask these 10, just go ahead and write whatever is from deep within. Do you think that these 10 would write on the same broad subject at all? All of them maybe write on health, or all of them will write on agriculture, or all of them will write on science, or all of them will write on history. Really, do you think so? All 10 over a period of 200 years? What if they chose, even if they chose, say, history? Do you think all 10 would really write one history? Only the Egyptian history? Only Babylonian history? Only the history of the Roman Empire? Or only the history of the British Empire? Would they really write on the same? Uh, Even if they chose one history, do you think they all would have the same hero and the same lead character? Think, my friends, how could this have happened? No work of fiction can maintain a single story and theme, not for 400 years, for 1400 years, unless it was supervised from beginning to end. It's impossible to envision a work of fiction that one person wrote out, but he gave to so many different authors and allowed them to write whatever they want, and all of them wrote on the same subject. Harmony within such diversity is an unusual feature, and then is has to be acknowledged as definitely unique. So that was number one. Number two. Number three is amazing influence. Since the dawn of civilization, no book has inspired as much creative endeavor among writers. No other book in all human history has in turn inspired the writing of so many books as the Bible. Now we don't have to agree just because Bernard Ram, who wrote this word, said so. No, we can go outside. We can check and look of all the writings in the world. If you go back to one source, any writing, You will find that there's one source that has the maximum number of books coming out from that source, and that's the Bible. Anywhere, take the whole world, and you will find that this is true. Civilization has been influenced more by the Judeo Christian scriptures than by any other book or series of books in the world. It's not only the whole world going this way, widespread, it's also the fact that it has stayed one of the top books right through century after century and even millennium after millennium. So it is not just a widespread book. The fact that it has stayed that long, that is an amazing uh, feature of this book. And then amazing preservation, which is number 4. Jews preserved it as no other manuscript has ever been preserved. They kept tabs on every letter, every syllable, word, and paragraph. Here's a question: whoever counted the letters and syllables and words of Plato or Aristotle, Cicero or Seneca or anybody else? The nation kept a body of professional copiers whose only job was to copy the manuscript. No other writing has this kind of a record backing it. And they did it with accuracy. In other words, they had certain criteria that had to be met, and then the copy would be accepted. And they had rules. The copier, the earliest copiers were called soferim, and then after that they were called the majorettes. And so the earliest writings we have are the majoretic texts. The majorettes were those who would copy. They would write them down. They had strict rules. You cannot stand and write. You had to sit in a certain way and then write. And you can't just start writing. You have to have a bath first. And after the bath, you're supposed to dress formally and then sit down. The material on which you write has to be absolutely accurate. It had to have this much length of each, we call it page, parchment, or in those, the first ones were on skin. So this skin would be shaped this way. It shouldn't be too long, it shouldn't be too short. And they would attach them one page after the other this way, not this way like we do. The number of lines should be either this many or that many, not less and not more. And the width of it should be exactly, I think it was 30 words, not more than 30 words in a line. All these details. The ink had to be made in a specific way. It had to be only black. And it had to be done with just concentration. The word God, for example, must not be written if you had just dipped your pen in the ink. It has to be written before that, so make sure that everything is going well, and then write the word God, Yahweh. And the rule there had to be in such concentration that this is one of the rules about it. If when you're writing that phrase that contains the word God, Yahweh, then it says that even if the king calls out your name, you must discard it because you're doing something that's even more. So, very strict. Now, what would happen if the mistake was made? Here's how they find out the mistake. They'd look at a book, for example. How many words are in the original? That many exact words should be in the copy that you've just made. The first and last words, yes, they are there. Then you count the middle word, and the middle word must be the same as in the original. If the middle word is not the middle word in your copy, that copy is not good. Not just the middle word, even the letters were counted. How many letters there, how many letters here, which is the middle letter there, which is the middle letter here. What would happen if you made a mistake? And this is the point, really, that I think we should be impressed. And I hope you, as a neutral inquirer, are willing to say, wow, if you made a mistake, you cannot correct it. You have to take that whole copy, discard it, start all over again. You cannot correct it. Think of the accuracy with which it was done then. Today we do find if it was discarded, they would sometimes put it into a place and a cupboard kind of place. It's called a geniza. There, nobody will read it from there. Only the one which is the correct copy will be read in public. Therefore, when the Jews looked at their writings as it came down, we think that the earliest one has more authority and more authenticity. No, in the Jews' mind, first of all, when the copy was made, it was given equal status as the original. And after the years and generations go by, it was the copy that was even more authentic because the older one might get a little faded or a little torn here, and some things might change. Something might be not as clear in its writing. The ink may have gone a little bit different. So the newer copy, the later ones, were more authentic. It's a little different from how we look at things. Can you imagine how they were looking at their book? You know why? Because they felt that this was the Word of God. For 2,300 to 3,900 years, the text of proper names have been transmitted with the most minute accuracy, a phenomenon unequaled in the history of literature. It may be safely said that no other work of antiquity has been so accurately transmitted. The manuscripts were considered sacred, the words of God. That's why they were kept with that reverence. Every Israelite child was taught extreme reverence for them. They were to be guarded with their lives. Now, if that is so precious, then they made sure that it was copied exactly. And that is why the nation of Israel had professional copiers to make sure that the copy was an exact replica of the original. Let's compare the accuracy of the transmission of the Bible with the 27 plays of Shakespeare. Now, the Bible manuscripts in those days were copied by hand, one word at a time. Shakespeare lived long after printing presses came into existence. So here's a printing press. You don't have to be bothered about accuracy for the simple reason that what is printed in one copy is going to be printed in the next. And so it's accurate. And also you can do many at one time. So now let's look at the record of Shakespeare's plays. In every one of the 27 plays of Shakespeare, there are dozens of disputed portions that are large and that can change the meaning of the text. And this is relatively recent Shakespeare's writings. Compare that with the Dead Sea Scrolls, in which we do find a full manuscript of the book of Isaiah. Now, Isaiah was written so many hundred BC. The Dead Sea Scrolls have been dated anywhere from 150 to 250 BC. So let's say Isaiah was 150 BC. This manuscript, the full manuscript, is available and it is kept in the Book of the Shrine in Tel Aviv, in Israel. And you can go there and actually see it. This is the earliest manuscript we have of the book of Isaiah, dated about 150 BC. So when you look at that, you can read the whole thing. Scholars have been allowed to read the whole thing. Check it out with the earliest manuscript we had before the Dead Sea Scrolls, and that was dated 900 AD. So now we have a manuscript dated 900 AD. We have a manuscript dated 150 BC. The difference is 1050 years. And when you look at those two manuscripts, they are exactly the same as far as the main body of the writing is concerned. Yes, there are some changes, but none of those changes make a difference in the actual message that was given. Most of them were actually the form of a word or the spelling of a word or the way in which they obviously had the scribe had made a slight slip at one letter. Nothing changed. In other words, for 1,000 years, we have the evidence that nothing has changed. The message has been intact. No other book has this kind of a record, has this kind of a selling point. Let's take a break right now, and if you have any questions, we can have them.
Yes, Dr. Pandit, we have three questions so far. And the first question is Jesus black or white?
What is the question again?
Is Jesus black or white?
He was neither. He was a Palestinian. Palestinians are brown.
Mm.
If you even if you're white, if you live in Palestine, the the sunshine is so much you would be tanned. So uh, Jesus was a tanned individual. He walked in the sun. He didn't live, like us, go to your office and come back home, drive in your car. And no, out in the open. So even if he was white, he was brown colored. But when you look at the Palestinians, they're neither black nor white. They were brown.
Our second question is, where does it say in the Bible that Jesus is God? As God refers to other prophets as his own son, which makes Jesus different than the rest.
Yeah, I think we discussed that yesterday, but good you ask it again because every question will bear repetition. Where does Jesus say he is God? He himself did not use the words, I am God. He didn't use those words. But what he did was clearly show that he believed he was God. For example, he said very clearly, my Father, everyone knew what that meant, God, and I are one. I came from the Father. So if he came from the Father, he had come from the realm of the Father. Therefore, he had to be God. That is one way of looking at it. From the other is, what did the Bible writers think? Those who saw him, those who lived with him. John was with him right from the beginning, one of the closest disciples. In the book of John, the Gospel of John, he says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. So that's another statement from that angle that Jesus was God. Number three, I think we mentioned this earlier. There was a time when a paralytic was brought to Jesus for healing. In fact, they let him down from the roof because the people were so crowded that they had to let him down. And then when he landed at Jesus' feet, the first thing Jesus said, not I'm going to heal you, he said, son, your sins are forgiven. Now, the Jewish rabbis and the Pharisees who were standing around there, they were upset. How can anyone forgive sins except God? Jesus recognized that and he looked to them and said, are you thinking that? You are thinking that only God can forgive sins. And then he says, what is easier to say to this person? Your sins are forgiven, or tell him to stand up, the paralytic, stand up, walk, and go home. Which is easier? Everybody would know it's easier to say your sins are forgiven, right? Than to tell a paralytic to rise up and walk. And then he turns to them and says, so that you may know that the Son of Man, now this is referring to himself, the Son of Man has power on earth to forgive sins. So, what is that claim? That's the claim to be God because everybody knew that only God can forgive. So he's referring to the Jewish mind that clearly states that only God can forgive sins. And he turns to them and says, so that you may know that I have a power on earth to forgive sins, I'm going to tell this person, stand up and walk. And he does that, and the person stands up and walks. Now, you tell me, has he not made the example and the evidence that what he is saying about himself is that he is God?
He has.
Um, four is that no one else in the Bible accepted worship. In fact, if you remember, there's more than one time, I'll remind you of one. When John saw an angel who was going to give him a message, he fell down at his feet, and the angel said, no, don't do that. I am not to be worshipped. Only God is to be worshipped. And even Peter and John, I think when they were had done a miracle and the people wanted to garland them and make them as God, they said the gods have come down. This, no, don't do that. On the contrary, Jesus accepted worship very clearly. And when people worshipped him, he accepted it. So on these 4 points, I would say yes, Jesus didn't say the words "I am God," but he did say that his equivalent for was God. There was a time when he, number five, one more. There was a time when the people were challenging him, and he said, "Before Abraham was, I am." Now, the words "I am" to a Jewish mind is taken straight from Exodus 3, where Moses asked God his name, and God said, "My name is I am." So here's another indication that Jesus didn't say, "I am God," but everything he did was very clearly to say that he was God.
We have two more questions, and the third one is, do you have to prepare yourself to read the Bible?
Say that again. Do you have to what?
Do you have to prepare yourself to read the Bible?
It depends on what you mean by prepare. You don't have to dress up, that's for sure. You don't have to put, a little perfume and all that, makeup. No, no. But you have to prepare your mind because this is a different kind of a writing. If you go to your math book, you prepare yourself to do mathematics. You prepare by saying, okay, if it says multiply, then you got to do a certain thing, and if it says divide, you got to do something else. So you are preparing yourself. If you want to go to the books of history, you are preparing yourself to find out which happened on which date and then who did what. Similarly, when you go to the Bible, you have to prepare yourself to find out the material that's in the Bible, and the material is not history or maths or science. This is a different kind of a subject in which your mind must be able to grasp what is being said, not in ordinary terms, but it goes beyond ordinary terms. And so, what we would say, you prepare yourself with four things. We said it earlier: humility, honesty, calmness, and respect. What's the first one? Humility. In other words, when you go to read the Bible, you must always ask yourself, I need to be taught. I need to understand. And who are you going to say those words to? To the author of the book. And the author of the book says he's alive. Jesus said he's alive. So you prepare yourself that way.
And the fourth question is, the fact that Jesus is called God's Son is confusing. It's confusing to many, as this makes Jesus subordinate to the Father, even in his pre-existence. Can you explain this?
Uh, you use two words there. You use Jesus being subordinate to the Father, and you also use the word pre existence. Those two should not really be brought together because there's no evidence that Jesus called his Father as Father in his pre existent state. It is only on this earth that he used the word Father. And the word Father, um, the Jews were children of God. So they definitely called themselves children of God. So a Jew could actually call himself son of God. Yes, that is true. And if you notice, we mentioned it earlier in Psalms 85. The words are, you are children of God, children of the Most High. Yes, you are the sons of God. So the word son of God, yes, it has been used for people. It has been used even for Adam. Adam was the son of God. But here's the difference. When the people use the word son of God, they mean to be on God's side. It's just like saying, I'm son of the soil. What's the meaning of son of the soil? If I'm in India and I say son of the soil, then I'm an Indian. It doesn't mean I'm made of mud, it's not that. It is mean son of the soil means that. So the son of something doesn't have to be meaning subordinate to. But when he came to this earth, he did use the word, Father, can I do this? Can I do that? Yes, Why? Because he voluntarily became subordinate as a human, not as God. As a human, he was subordinate to his father. As a human, also, while he was subordinate, in the Jewish economy, the word for father that the Jews used when they said, "We are sons of God," the word for father was abhinu. Abhinu is very formal. In other words, you come, say, to the door of your father. You just don't run in. You come to the door of your father's office, for example, and you say, "Abhinu, please, can I say something? Abhinu, please have mercy on me." In other words, it's a clear indication that you are at his feet asking for mercy, and in a formal way. No Jew would ever describe God as any other with an any other word than Abhinu. All right. Now the Jews also had a word for their own father, earthly father, and that word was Abba. Abba. So a child could run into his father's office or room over to say, "Abba, I want this," and "Abba, I want that." And there's a different relationship between the description of Abhinu and the description of Abba. Here's the difference here. When the people heard what Jesus was saying when he referred to his father, he didn't use the word Abhinu. He used the word Abba. Whoa! They were angry. How can an ordinary person call the mighty, almighty El Shaddai as Abba? Abba is your earthly father. But Jesus used the word Abba for his father in heaven. In other words, yes, he was subordinate to his father as a human, but he made a clear distinction at that point. He was under him. For those 33 years he lived on this earth, he was a human. He said he would be under the father because at that point, the father would take care of him. As a human, my friends, you and I, we cannot take care of ourselves. We think we do, but we cannot. We need somebody to help and take care of us, and that's the father. So let's ask, who takes care of the father then? None. He is God. Before coming to this earth, Jesus was God. Nobody had to take care of him. But when he came to this earth as a human, his father had to take care of him as a human. So he talked that way, he expressed himself that way. At the same time, he made a difference. My father and I are one. Therefore, I can call him Abba, not Abhinu. So he made a difference.
Thank you, Dr. Pandit. At this time, there are no further questions, so
We'll carry on then.
yeah. If you have any further questions, please place them in the chat. Thank you.
All right, we have three more that features that we want to look at. Amazing survival. Do you know that this is the only book, the Bible, to be repeatedly banished and attempted to be destroyed completely? No other book has had such hatred lasting for not just a few months or years, but for generations. We don't like this book. We want it completely destroyed. Decades. This is the only book to have such a name attached to it. It has to be destroyed. No other book has been so chopped, knifed, sifted, scrutinized, and vilified, and been subject to such a mass attack as the Bible, with such venom and skepticism upon every chapter, line, and tenet. Did you get that picture? Got it? This book has been chopped, knifed, questioned, vilified. May I ask you, do you think a neutral inquirer will do that? Are you a neutral inquirer? Or are you kniving and sifting and vilifying and asking questions so that you can show that it's all wrong? That's a big question, right? In our own minds. That is why the challenge right in the beginning, do not be a believing inquirer, just swallow everything without question. Do not be a disbelieving inquirer in which you chop and knife and vilify and make sure that nobody has any respect for it. No, you have to be a neutral inquirer. As a neutral inquirer, we learn a lot. Emperors and popes. Now, this is the question of destroying it. Kings and priests, princes and rulers have all tried their hand at it. They die. The book still stays on. And example, really, a classical example is the French philosopher Voltaire's prophecy. Now, Voltaire was a brilliant philosopher, rich philosopher. He lived in France. And at the time when people were really, it was a Renaissance kind of thing, a time when people said, no, we don't want this thing of God and all. We have our own reasons by which to live. So the goddess of reason was enthroned during that time. And Voltaire was a big proponent of that. And so he was a philosopher. He would write his books and his pamphlets and his articles, and he was rich. So in his basement, he housed his printing press. In other words, Voltaire had his own printing press. So whatever he wanted, he would write out, print it there, distribute it. I mean, he was famous. And not only was he famous, I mean, he said things that were philosophically sound. So the people had tremendous respect for him. He died in 1778. Before he died, we're not sure exactly when, at least I don't know, but definitely before 1778, he made this prediction that in 100 years, Christianity will be ground to the dust and thrown out. We will not have Christianity. Therefore, we will not have the Bible at all. 100 years. Why 100 years? Because he saw the way the things were happening little by little. The people were getting fed up of that. They were throwing it out. More and more people were slowly coming to the place that, nah, the Bible is questioned. Too much questions. I am not like, I don't want to be impressed with that. So 100 years and it'll be gone. First of all, we know today this is the 21st century. Still there. So the prophecy has not come to pass. So his prophecy was wrong. Who has died? Voltaire died, not the book. The book is still there, alive and well. But here's another thing. He mentioned his printing press in his basement. 50 years after he died, there was an organization that bought his house and his printing press. Do you know what the name of that organization was? It was the Geneva Bible Societies. So instead of 100 years in the Bible going out of existence, in 50 years, the Geneva Bible Society bought his printing press and printed what? Bibles in his printing press. They die. The book still stays, still has stayed. Number 6, amazing circulation. In other words, how many copies spread and sold. The average number of sales for a new book is 1,000 because most people don't even advertise their books. So 1,000 copies is average. You've done okay if 1,000 copies were sold. The bestseller status, like in New York Times bestseller, once you get to the bestseller status, man, oh, you've made a certain mark. If 1 million copies were spread, then you can say that your work has done real well. 1 million copies means the people know about you now. And in fact, they're waiting for your next book because so many people bought and read and they liked it. 10 million copies? Whoa, that is really high. There are very few who have reached that, such a rare achievement. The Bible, without comparison on this point. The United Bible Society in 1998, this is just 1 year, okay? The other statistics that we are given, bestseller and 1 million and 10 million, is over a long period of time. This is a report for 1 year. The 1998 Scripture Distribution Report, the total distribution of copies of the Bible or portions thereof in 1998 alone reaches a staggering 585 million. Why so many? You remember when we looked at the length of the ministry of Jesus? It was so little, only 3.5 years. So immediately we ask why. Now on the other side, 585 million, that's an amazing number. So we have to ask why. Why is it that high? Well, every book that is successful must have at least two things. Number one, the material that it is writing should be relevant. It should be something that will apply to the people who read it in some way or the other. Number two, it must grip them. It must amaze them some way or the other. And the third one, which is the reason why it goes out, most books that get 10 million and more sold, they're not sold because it was advertised on TV or on the radio. Most of them in those days, and even in our days, they reached that number because of what we call word of mouth advertisement. One person tells the other. So one person tells the other, hey, did you read that? It's really good. And the person says, really? Oh, let me go and find out. That's how all successful books are spread. Not just TV and radio, and nowadays, of course, media, social media. No, word of mouth. And social media is the way we send messages individually. Why is it 585 million? Because the content is relevant, it can grip you, and it has gone by word of mouth. That's an amazing statement to make about one book. So, number seven, the seventh point for this evening, amazing translation. The United Nations lists more than 6,000 languages on earth. All of them do not have a written script, most of them do. So, the actual number of languages that could be one that can be translated into is less than 6,000, but let's say 6,000. The first 1,000, or the most widely read 1,000 languages, would cover about, in fact, more than 90% of the world's population. Osho is a writer, meditation writer. His books on meditation have been translated into 40 languages. That's plenty. If you are an author, um, I have written, so I'm an author, and I know how it feels. Like you like your books to be really sold by the millions, but it has to be sold, it has to be advertised. And if somebody says, hey, can I translate your book? And some people have asked me, so it really gives you a good feeling. Hey, if somebody wants it translated, that means it has an appeal somewhere. So the translation tells you about its appeal. Osho's books, 40 languages. Hey, great. E.G. White, she is a writer, and among the Seventh-day Adventists, she is known as a prophetess also. And she is also the most prolific non-fiction woman writer in history of the world. Her works have been translated into 100 languages. Whoa. Are you willing to say wow? Even 40 languages is wow. 100 languages is wow. But the Bible has no equal. The Wycliffe Bible translators alone, this is just one group, has over 6,000 people working with more than 850 different languages in 50 countries. Of these, 468 languages are being translated for the first time. And this report I got is more than 6 years old. So now maybe all those 465 languages are already done and they've gone to the next. So many. No other book today is being translated so widely and with such rapidity. People are pouring in their money because they want it to be translated more and more. So the number of translations is really very high. What does this statement say? This is from an institute that was following these translations, and they say that we are less than a generation away from witnessing the world's first universally translated text. No other book in history comes close. What's the meaning of universally translated? It is translated into every language that it can possibly be translated into. Look, no other book comes anywhere close. So, in its translation, here are three things that we look at, and you have to be amazed. Number one, look at the past. It is the first major work to be translated in the world. The Hebrew Old Testament was translated into Greek more than 200 years before Christ. It's called the Septuagint because 70 scholars went from Palestine to Alexandria, because Alexandria had a lot of Jews, but they knew only Greek. So now they wanted the Old Testament in Greek. So the 70 scholars went there to help them out and translated into Greek. This is the first major work of translation on the face of this earth. So when you look at the back, the Bible was the first major book to ever be translated. Present, it is the most translated book ever. No book comes even close. And the future, it is the only text to have a reasonable chance to be universally translated. That means to every language on earth. And it may happen, friends, in our generation. We are coming close to that, the first universally translated text. Can you imagine one book getting all these achievement awards? The first major book to be translated, the most translated at present, and the only one that is probably going to be a universally translated text. So here's the book, amazingly written. We saw that, all those points. And with all the differences, number two, amazing harmony, beginning to end. One story, one theme, one lead character, one hero. Amazing influence, not only in widespread, but in the time, century after century, millennium after millennium, and preserved in accuracy. Number five, amazing survival. It has survived some of the nastiest attempts to really smash it out of history. It has the greatest circulation and the widest and the greatest amount of translation ever. So now we've got two things, the man and the book. So when we put them together, the conclusions regarding this man and this book have a credibility that is backed by clear and convincing evidence. So far, in our view, nothing in our existence can equal this combo. A reasonable conclusion which was reached based on openly available data. Anybody can do this, what I did and showed you. Just go and check it out. And it was gathered by a neutral inquirer like you and me. We just got the information. And so we can agree to Socrates to go where the argument leads, go where the evidence shows. Don't pull the evidence where you want it to go. Go where the evidence takes you. And if you do that, you will salute this combo of the man and the book. Question time.
So, Dr. Pandit, I have three questions that are all linked. And the first one is, what other books has the Bible inspired?
Other books, what again?
What other books has the Bible inspired?
The word inspired means encouraged, not inspired by God. There are lots of books that have been, you just go to any library. If you go to a Christian library, all those books about on Christianity are inspired by the Bible. So we don't have to ask which one. There are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of books that have been inspired. In this way, the word inspired means encouraged, not inspired by God. But it may be inspired by God, but not have the evidence of inspiration to be part of what is called the canon of scriptures. So the canon of scriptures is the Bible. It in turn has encouraged a whole lot of writings. That's what it means. So which other book? Lots of them. You can go to any Christian library. What's the second question?
I'm sorry, Dr. Pandit, I didn't catch that.
Yeah, I think I saw it on your screen. You were all still, so something happened. Uh, did you get the question responded to question? Did you hear that?
No.
So I'll say it again. The word inspired does not mean inspired as the writers of the Bible were inspired so that their writings were part of what is called the canon of scriptures. They were inspired in the sense they were encouraged. You read something inspiring and then you do something, you can call that also inspiration, but not the inspiration that is equal to the biblical inspiration. So when you ask which book has the Bible inspired, I am saying it has inspired hundreds and hundreds of thousands of books. So you can ask which one. I can give you any number of books that the Bible has inspired. Just go to a Christian library, and all those books have been inspired by the Bible. All. There's nothing that is not inspired by the Bible.
Thank you, Dr. Pandit. And the second question is, how has the Bible inspired you personally?
How has the Bible inspired me personally? Uh, why did you ask that question?
I don't know. I just got a question from someone.
Oh, I know, I know. I'm asking that individual, not you. Why would you ask that question? Well, but I should answer it because I said I will respond to every question you ask. Look, have you noticed students of literature, when they read, for example, medieval English literature, which would include the works of Shakespeare, and you chat with any of them, they will easily be able to rattle off, I mean, by memory, sentences. Lady Macbeth said this, and Romeo said this, and Juliet said that. How do they know all those words, exact words? I mean, they can, it's verbatim because they are involved in that. And it really is a part of their thinking when you get into literature. How has the Bible inspired me? There's a lot of things that I can say, but I can give you just one. It has gripped me as being absolutely unique. So I read it with awe and wow. I know there are differences and like I said, gaps and discrepancies and even contradictions. Yeah, they are there, but I still read with awe. And when I read, I realize, man, some of these statements are just amazing statements. So about 12 years ago, I began to memorize portions of the Bible because of sheer interest. It's not that I have to memorize so that, on in April, I will tell the people in Birmingham and Manchester that I memorized. No, I memorized so that because it was interesting to me. And I kept on memorizing. And over the 12 years or so, I have memorized about 80 chapters of the Bible.
Wow.
So I'm not saying that as an achievement. I am saying that just like the students of literature just memorize Shakespeare because it grips them, so also it's an indication that possibly the words of the Bible have gripped me enough so that I started memorizing them. Now, everyone doesn't have to memorize chapters. You can memorize just verses if you're interested. Just learn that up. By the way, once you do that, you are able to speak in a certain way, especially when you are thinking. You can use those words and it makes a difference. So it has how have I been inspired? Here's one way. The other is to recognize that we are dealing with something that's absolutely unique, unusual. The person who's described in this book is unusual. And it's not unusual just by being different. It's unusual uh, in being so actually attractive to a seeker, to an inquirer. The words in the Bible, the words of Jesus, are extremely attractive.
Thank you. And the third linked question is, are there any inconsistencies or contradictions in the Bible?
There are. Um, and I wonder why you are asking that. I really wonder. I really wonder. Are you asking that just to know? Are you asking that because it has troubled you? If it has troubled you, you already know the discrepancies. That's why you got troubled. And if you are troubled, you should ask. Because every troubled person who has a question should ask. By the way, a diversion from what we are saying, you should ask. Because I sometimes ask the audience, which is the dumbest question of all? Which is the dumbest question? The one that is not asked. So if you have it in your mind, that's the dumb question. Once you bring it out, it is no longer dumb. So you must ask. So I'm asking you again, why do you ask that question to look for the discrepancies? It may be so that you are aware of it, so that when somebody else says there are discrepancies, you can say, I know there are discrepancies. So, yes, there are discrepancies, there are gaps, there are contradictions in the Bible. And if you look carefully at them, you can find them. I would prefer not to deal with that right now. If you really want to know, go ahead and email me, and I will mention it to you. Um, it's not because I'm hiding; it's well known. But I'd prefer not to discuss that right now, except to say that there are, because every belief system has that. There's not a single belief system that does not have these three things: gaps, discrepancies, and contradictions. So if you're asking for the contradictions in the Bible, I would like to ask you first, what are you comparing the Bible to? And then we will have a comparison of the gaps in the Bible and the gaps in that other book as well. Like I said, do the pan process always go across? A neutral inquirer never looks at only one side. So, once again, I'm bringing the principle out. If you ask for the gaps in the Bible, please tell me which other book we're going to refer to, and then we'll look at the gaps in both, especially if it is old, ancient religious writings. And we will look at the discrepancies in both. That is why I'm suggesting we won't do that right now. Is that okay? I hope so.
Our next question is, would you recommend a particular Bible? The reason I am asking is because there are many Bibles today that have texts removed and words changed.
Um, Actually, that's a good question. Just like the previous question to me, where are those? It's good to find out where are those changes that you say, and you say if there are some things that's left out. Yeah, there are some things that are left out, but you should be able to point those out. All right. Now the word which Bible. Let's clarify that question. It's not which Bible, but which version of the Bible, which translation of the Bible. There's only one Bible. So, which version of the Bible should you read? Good question. Try to get the somebody's mic is still on and not muted. Thank you. I still can hear. Can you request the people? May we request those who have their mics on to please mute them? Thank you. So, what are we talking about? We're talking about different version of the Bible. Uh, get the one that is first within reach, whichever it is. All right. If you have two or three within reach, then look for the one that says that they have tried to go back to the earliest written sources. Now, the King James Version does go back to quite an early written source. But the King James Version has the English that is medieval English. It is not today's English. So I would suggest if you want to go to King James, you read the King James and also get the New King James, which has a little more modern translation words that you can understand. what they say, and I cannot vouch for this, but what they say, the most accurate translation is the New American Standard Version. So if you want to be a stickler, if you want to make sure, then that's the one that I would go for.
Thank
But
you.
but I would tell you this: do not worry about which version. If you want to be a stickler for this word and that word and be a theologian and a person who is going to do a real hard study, yes, then look for that. If you are a person who wants to know the plan of salvation, which Jesus has told us about, then any of these versions will do. Any. You can pick up any version, and in every version, the main story, the trunk of the tree, has always been intact. Think, it has been intact. It has stayed intact. No version has ever changed the trunk of the tree, the main parts of your gospel. It has stayed intact. And that is why Mark Twain, Mark Twain, he was quite a guy, a brilliant, incisive thinker, and also quite a humorist. He would say smart things, but he was also a deep thinker. And this is what he said, and I want you to remember this: the plain things are the main things, and the main things are the plain things. And the plain things of the gospel, my friends, are found in every version of the Bible. So this is what he also said in another statement. He said, I'm not bothered about what things are perplexing in the Bible. I'm really bothered about what is so clearly understood and I'm not doing. That is what bothers me. So, what is that bothers you? Something that you don't understand, or something that you really do understand? It's very clear, but you're simply not doing. And that is your perplexity. I'm suggesting go for that. That should be your question. That which I can clearly see as my duty and as the way I'm supposed to live and do. But man alive, I'm not really in that way. So, what's the explanation there? And then when you do that, you get back to the trunk of the gospel. And we're going to look at it tomorrow and day after. When you look at that, the trunk has remained in all the versions of the Bible, and your path of salvation to the next life is clear as crystal if you look for it with the mind of a neutral inquirer.
Another question is, are there any Bible translations that are more no, yeah, that's more accurate to the original language? As some do miss out verses like the New English, like New International Version.
I think there were too many questions. I'll be doing them one by one. What's the first question? First of
Are
those.
there are there any Bible translations that are more accurate to the original language?
I'm not sure what you mean because a translation is a translation. So to say that it's accurate to the original, I said what they say is that the new American International Standard Version is supposed to be the most accurate. But really, again, why are you asking for that when any translation will show you the way to heaven? So don't worry. But I'm saying that the closest one, I'd say these three. If you go for new, the American Standard, King James, and the New King James. If you do these three, I think if you want to really be a stickler, these three would be good. But if you want to really understand, you can go to other translations also. In other words, there are other paraphrases also that you can understand a lot from. So we don't have to stick to one. You really want to know? Sometimes you should read 3 or 4 Bibles, and then you'll come to get the good picture of what is being said. In the end, you must know what the trunk is, because the trunk sits in the ground and is steady. It is the small branches that swing in the breeze. Don't go sit there. Sit on the trunk. So that no matter what the storm is, the trunk doesn't move.
And another one says, has some books of the Bible been hidden from us?
Has some books of the Bible been hidden from us?
Yes.
Once again, what is the background to that question? Do you think there are some other books that are hid and nobody told you and me? And do you think that those books will tell you a little bit more about the way of salvation? So if they are hid, what can we do about it? Actually, nothing, unless you go looking for it. And where will you look for it? I don't know. So my response to your question is, I really don't know whether any books have been hid. What I do know is what we have is more than sufficient to find your way to the kingdom of God.
Thank you. Another one says, do we have to celebrate Christmas and Easter?
Depends on what you mean by the word celebrate. If you mean celebrate, for example, let's say Christmas. If you mean celebrate is put a Christmas tree and lights in your house and exchange gifts. Nothing wrong with that, but that is not celebrating Christmas. Christmas is the time when Jesus was born. Did you understand what that meant for Jesus to be on earth? So if we really want to celebrate that, the word celebration now becomes not just, song and dance, also that's good, but it does become an understanding of what that means. And I will suggest that when you get that meaning a little bit, most of us can't get it. And in fact, I think humans can't get the whole picture. We get a little bit at a time. And when you get a little bit at a time of the real meaning, you will be deeply joyous. You will thank God for what He did. It's not the question of trees and lights and gifts. No, now you're going to have a feeling from deep in your heart of just utter thanks, gratefulness, and with that gratefulness comes a trust, and with that trust comes loyalty. Those are the way you actually celebrate Christmas. um, Same thing with New Year, what we say, Easter. Easter again is not bunnies and searching for eggs, Easter eggs. Those are also part of the celebrations, as it were. But the real celebration of Easter is to recognize that somebody died and rose up. Wow. Did you ever say wow to that? Or is it just a story that everyone is saying, so you also have to say the same story? Have you ever sat down and thought what it is for a person to go into death and come back and say, I have the keys of death in my hand? That is Easter. He has the keys in his hand. Death is a vanquished, it's a defeated enemy. Because of what he did, he rose up from the dead. And when you again look at that, you say, whoa, and what's he going to do with that? Do you know what's he going to do with that? He's going to give you and me the victory over death as well. Trust him. That is the meaning of Easter, far more than whether it's the right day or the wrong day and what you do on Easter and look for the eggs or have a bunny hunt or whatever. Get the truth of it, and I'm telling you, when you get the truth of it, it is amazing. It grips you really deep in your heart. That's the meaning of, I would think, the meaning of this word celebration.
Thank you, Dr. Pandit, for another evening of deeper insight.
Yesterday, so there are no questions right now, right?
Yes.
Okay. Remember I said yesterday, did you do Isaiah 53? Can you see all of them? Is there anyone raising a hand to say that I did it? Great. One Kennedy and Sia raised his hand and said, I'm glad you did it. Um, I hope you were able to clearly see which way the meaning goes, whether Isaiah 53 is Israel or is it Jesus. But only one person. Yes?
No, sorry, mine is a different question, not the one you're talking about. Sorry about that.
Oh. Then that's to the organizer. Okay, well, let's take the question first, then we'll go to this.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pandey. Yeah, my question is, we know we have Old Testament and the New Testament. And the Bible was inspired by God, and
Oh, just one moment, just one moment. What word did you use? That we know that the Bible was what?
and we know you said the Bible was inspired
Inspired,
by,
yeah.
yeah, by God. And I want to know, when they tried to destroy the Bible or hide it, is it the Old Testament they were trying to destroy and hide, or both of them? And if both of them, why they were trying to destroy it? Thank you.
Very good question. Firstly, we know the times when they were able, when the word had gotten out that that the book has to be destroyed, was basically after the Christian church was established. So what they were trying to destroy was both. So one, the whole book, Old Testament and New Testament, just destroy it. So now the question is why? Why would anybody want to destroy a book? And when you look at it, it is those who were actually sometimes even leaders of the Christian world at that time, they wanted to destroy it. Why? Personally, again, the why question is hard and difficult, but it can lead to a kind of a study. So I'm suggesting that this is my response. This is not a reason, because the one who'll give the reason is the one who said, let's destroy it. And I'm not that one. But when you look at it, here's what we might think as the answer, or the reason. Number one, the book is a very peculiar book. It has two things. Number one, it has a very radical claim. In other words, its claim is just way out. The claim is Jesus is God. Now, you can't do anything with that. It just stays there put. Jesus is God. You are just human. Therefore, the best way for you to live on this earth is to listen to Him. All right? So it is a classically, solid statement that is radical. Jesus, the only way. That's number one. Number two, once you go to Jesus, the only way, He says He's alive. That's another amazing thing. He's alive. So the alive person who had gone into death is now telling you to follow him. And then when you follow him, apart from what is a radical claim of his, now becomes a radical experience in the one who is following. They have a certain experience, and we kind of, in general, we call it the born again experience, a real true born again experience, a follower of Jesus. This born again person is not afraid of any other human. His champion, his hero is Jesus. So no matter who else is around, he's not going to listen to them if you go against Jesus. No. And so, for example, when some of these popes and emperors and kings who want to destroy the Bible, when they would say something, these people who have been radically affected by the Bible would refuse to obey. They said, no, we're not going to obey. And then when you try to do anything to them, they're just fearless, total courage. Now, when you see a group of people who are just simply fearless, although you have the power to kill them, but they're fearless, they're not afraid of death. What do you want to do? They're not listening to you. So now you really are in a position in which your own status is being questioned. You are king, and this group is not listening. What do? You want to exterminate them. But where was their problem? The problem was not them so much. The problem was the book. The book that had such radical claims and then had such a radical effect on the people. And therefore, let's hit at the book. If we hit at the book, then these guys have nothing to stand on, and then they will listen to us. So we will have the power. And so let's knock off the book. So that's what they did, and they went on for years and generations. Let's just throw off the book. Let's destroy it completely. So I'm giving you a picture that I got when I looked at it. It is possible that this is the way it really happened. They got scared of the people who were not scared but below them. So the smallest individual who understands the Bible becomes fearless when facing the biggest person on earth because his God is stronger than them all. And that makes the others frightened, and they see that the problem is the book, so they attack the book. Is that reasonable?
Yes. And can I ask, so is the Bible the oldest book in the world, or we have different ones?
Oh, once again, a good question, but always ask yourself why you are asking that. A neutral inquirer will always ask, now, why am I asking this? What will it do? What if it is not the oldest book? Nothing really. The question is whether it's inspired of God. When you look at the age or time when it was written, we do know there are some writings that predate uh, the, the Bible. For example, we know there were some laws that were written down at least 200 to 300 years before Moses wrote his books down, and those the law of Hammurabi. That's in history. So, if you're asking if there any real writing of that nature before the Bible, yeah. When we look at the other religions, for example, Zoroastrianism, the dates of Zoroastrianism goes that far back, at least according to the dates that we have. His name was Zarathustra, and he wrote the ideas of Zoroastrianism. By the way, Zoroastrianism also has three gods, and but his writings are, it could be before Moses wrote. Similarly, the writings of the Hindus, some of their writings, the Rig Veda, which is the earliest Vedic writings, the dates could be earlier. So, to me, the date of writing is not as important as what the writing is saying once it is written. For example, the Bible is saying that it is God breathed, God inspired. And once it is inspired, it says, it goes back to the beginning of the earth. So the Bible's writing describes the beginning of the earth. It may have been written 1,000 years after the beginning, but it's writing describing the beginning. So in the writings, you go back quite a lot back. And according to the claim, then the writing is talking about what happened at the very beginning of this earth. So it really does not matter when it was written. It does matter whether God was the one inspiring that. But as
Thank
far
you
as your
so much.
question goes,
Yeah, thank
it
you so much.
appears it appears that there are some other writings before it.
Thank you, Dr. Pandit.
Yeah, okay.
We have one more question, Dr. Pandit, and
Sure.
it says, and the person who wrote it was watching from YouTube, and they said, how does one memorize a Bible verse?
How?
Yes.
Okay, that's a good question. I still have a kind of seminar where I teach people how to learn. It's a very nice seminar. It's a professional seminar. And in memory, when you want to do a memory thing, one of the strongest methods of memory is to repeat. In other words, keep reading it so many times, verse. Just keep reading it. And then close it down and see if you can remember. You'll remember a few words and you won't remember some of the others. And go back and read. And if you do it a few times, it'll just stick in your mind. Do it again within 24 hours. Because here's what science has shown, that when you're studying anything, you lose 50% if you don't review within 24 hours. So, here, all you students, if you study anything, you want to remember it, you must review it within 24 hours. Otherwise, you're going to lose 50% in the first 24 hours. So review that. And then if you review after another 1 week, it stays fixed in your mind. After 1 month, if you do it again, and stays fixed. And if you do it after 1 year, you'll find that most of the stuff, if you remember just fact, you will remember it. And it's called long-term memory then. So from short term, you make it into long term. Short term is done by repetition. And by repetition, I don't mean you say it so many times. You also do it in different ways. For example, if you are reading something you read the word question time on the screen right now. Actually, you're already doing it 2 or 3 ways. You are looking at it, you are reading it, you are thinking about it. So you've already done 3 repetitions. So in that way, and if you write it down, then it's another repetition. If you underline it, if you after writing down, that's another repetition. If you highlight it, that's another repetition. So these are the different ways of repeating, and you will remember. You will remember. People's memories are limitless. Do you know we still haven't come to the limits of a human memory? If you ask a person who has memorized the maximum and ask him to do a little bit more, he'll still do a little bit more. We haven't come to the end. So whoever you are, you have a huge memory bank. You have to use it. Some statistics show that humans use only about 10% of their brain power. So you really have quite a lot. So go ahead and use repetition, different types of repetition, underline, highlight, color it. And repetition is the way to memorize.
Thank you. If there are no more questions, thank you for joining this. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Micah?
Yeah.
We said that we would just mention a few of the verses of Isaiah 53.
Okay.
And see if it verses since only this is I guess nobody did it. So let me do at least a few. So there's a hand raised. Catherine. What was the hand raised for? Question?
I'm just unmuting you, Catherine, if you like to speak.
Unmute. Hello? Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, I just want to say I did read Isaiah 53, and also I've come to understand they're talking about Jesus from my understanding. And because when I read Luke 23, I see a comparison of what happened to Jesus coming out of prison, going through the judgment, and I see that is a comparison of Isaiah 23 and the New Testament and linking that to Jesus. Am I right?
Thank you very much. So I'm going to read to you now from Isaiah 53, and we'll put both of the words Israel as well as Jesus and see what it looks like. For example, verse 4.
Okay.
We'll put the word Israel first. Surely Israel has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Does that sound more like it, or does it sound better when it says, surely Jesus has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows? Verse number 5. Israel was wounded for our transgression, and Israel was bruised for our iniquities. Or does it make more sense to say Jesus was wounded for our transgression? Somebody's mic is not muted. Jesus was wounded for our transgression, and Jesus was wounded for bruised for our iniquities. Verse 6. The Lord has laid on Israel the iniquity of us all. Or does it make more sense to say the Lord has laid on Jesus the iniquity of us all? Verse 8. Israel was cut off from the land of the living. Or was it Jesus who was cut off from the land of the living? By the way, Israel is still in existence today. And verse 9, they made Israel's grave with the wicked. Or was it Jesus who made his grave with the wicked? Verse 12, Israel poured out his soul unto death. Or was it Jesus who poured out his soul unto death? And again, verse 12, this is number 7 that we are doing. Israel bore the sins of many. Whose sins did Israel bear? Or was it Jesus who bore the sins of many? So once you do this comparison, like I said, as a neutral inquirer, just put it first Israel into wherever it's he or him, and then put to Jesus and see which one it is. And I'm glad Catherine said that it points to Jesus more than to Israel. Even if you don't go to Luke, just stay right there and put those words in, and you'll find that it really points to Jesus. All right, I think we've done enough for one day. Any other questions or none?
No. Thank you all for joining us this evening. We invite you back tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. where the topic will be meaning of the word gospel. Thank you for joining us this evening, and good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.